It is a small region nestled in the heart of Europe. The clacking of stork beaks resound across the countryside. The shadows of the castle encompass the smallest of mice, which fight not only for their own survival, but that of their progeny. Here, intense heat and color coexist with the mountains in a sometimes harsh climate populated by excellent climbers. Encased between the Rhine and the Vosges, an actual paradise still exists in the middle of fields, orchards, and vineyards. In early April, after 6 months of vacationing in Africa, the storks are back in the Illwald Nature Reserve in the Selestat Ried area in Alsace. This pair of storks has built a nest at the top of a dead poplar tree several years ago. They meet every spring. As the male and female spend the winter on different sides of Africa, they must first restore contact. This year again, both of them will raise their children. The mating lasts only a few seconds and marks the beginning of a difficult period for the couple, since at the end of only 4 weeks of brooding, the young will be born. The two birds did not choose their hunting territory at random. This land swarms with life. Here is the smallest mouse in Europe. This Eurasian harvest mouse has discovered a female. But she isn't sure she wants him. As soon as he gets too close to her, she takes off. But the male does not allow himself to be discouraged. And, eventually, he reaches his goal. When you want to find a partner in the tall grass, you have to be persistent. At the beginning of spring, the water from the melting snow and the rain floods the meadows. A dangerous time for small rodents. Climbing is the only way to stop from freezing to death. But the climb does have its downsides. The male must return to the mainland as soon as possible if he does not want to starve. At this time of year, he must feed himself constantly and cannot wait for the rains to recede. He therefore has no choice. The water contained in his fur impacts his movements. It must also be said that he weighs only 6 grams. His wet fur does not impact his movement that much. On the reed next to him, the female hesitates a little. This is how those who are afraid of water survive in the flood zones. From here, the paths of these little mice separate. In 3 weeks, the female will have to raise the babies alone. Now she must eat as much as she can to ensure her survival and that of her offspring. The male will pursue his path of eternal bachelorhood, always in search of the next conquest. Several weeks have passed, and the full wane of spring has arrived at the foot of the Vosges. The eggs of the storks have hatched. 3 little ones come out of their shells. While 2 of them are doing well, the third is weak and sickly. His brother and sister are far faster than him when the parents bring food into the nest. In order for him to reach adulthood as well, it will take him a little luck, but mostly enough food and heat. Their neighbors are still working on their nest. Both return late from Africa. This newly formed couple has chosen to settle on this abandoned old nest that needs to be renovated. They will not have children this year. It is too deep into spring to launch into such a venture. The lovebirds will have all summer to consolidate themselves as a couple and continue their courtship. This is part of the ceremony, just as the bridal dance they are currently exhibiting here. For storks, finding food has become more and more complicated. As each year passes, the amount of meadows transformed into a cultivated farmland increases. The plains of the Rhine take on the appearance of an agricultural desert. Corn cultivation, especially, does not leave much space for nature anymore. Sprayed fertilizers and pesticides are retained in Europe's largest aquifers. Thanks to breeding and reintroduction programs, storks still live in the countryside of Alsace. However, to eat the correct amount, the storks must be able to find mice, frogs, or collared snakes, which are rare. Most of the time, storks must be contented with earthworms and insects. It's not enough to satisfy the entire family. The female harvest mouse would be a treat for the stork. But she remains well hidden in the tall grass. Afraid that a fox might lie in wait, the storks do not dare venture too far into the meadows. The mother-to-be can thus eat in peace. Chemical fertilizer could destroy the diversity of the flora, and harvest mice would be one of the many species to starve. And now it's the beginning of summer, and the heat is too much for the storks. Only 2 of the 3 small ones survived. These 2 are doing well, but are constantly hungry while their parents keep bringing them food. The 2 adults never meet except when they bring food back to the nest, which does not prevent them from greeting each other as affectionately as they initially did when first courting with the same nuptial dance. Normally, regurgitation is only formality. But storks may sometimes have a few things stuck in their throats. And here, dinner served. In the Selestat Ried area, dead wood is a very popular habitat, especially for the storks on their old poplars. They have a breathtaking view of the meadow bathed in morning dew, where life awakens at first light of day. The harvest mouse also would like to enjoy a little of the morning dew whilst trying to save energy. But first, she must climb. A harvest mouse has the ability of a tightrope walker, blessed with paws adapted to climbing and a prehensile tail which prevents them from falling when the wind shakes the reeds too hard. Harvest mice need the diversity of the plant population to build their nests in the wild grass. Three small harvest mice are born here. They are 5 days old and 3 centimeters long, naked as worms, and they are still blind. "24 hours later, their fur is already beginning to grow, but this new fur does not keep them warm enough. The best way to conserve heat is still to snuggle against each other. For the mother, this period is the most dangerous of her life. For 14 days, she will have to feed these little ones whilst looking for food so as not to die herself. A huge challenge for such a small mouse. As these babies gain weight, the female loses it. She washes her cubs with the utmost care. For the little harvest mouse, these are the most blessed days of their lives. Their life will never be as easy as it is now. When they do not suckle, they sleep. Growing to become 5-centimeter giants takes all their energy. At 7 days, their eyes are still closed. But on the 8th day, with the first rays of sun, the little ones see light of day almost all at the same time. Their mother is practically out of the woods. She has survived the breastfeeding period. But she must not commit any error and remain vigilant when seeking food. She also needs a little help from the weather. The cold and humidity could kill these little ones very quickly. the absence of the mother might prove fatal for the nest, because the little ones are bored and they have an irresistible need to eat anything and everything. 11 days after their birth, they begin to eat their nest. The little ones end up piercing several windows in the wall of their home, and thus discover the vast world. But not for more than a few seconds. It's much better inside. It's now the middle of summer. Even high up, you cannot feel the slightest breath of fresh air. As they do not know how to fly yet, the young storks are trapped in their nest and risk dying of thirst. Thanks to their long beak, the adult can give water to their young as easily as a watering hose. The adult finally opens the floodgates. But it was only a drop of water in the barren desert within the bodies of their children. After weeks of drought, the rain has finally come. The storks are nailed to the ground. They seem to be waiting for something. In a few minutes, the animals that live under the earth will rise to the surface to avoid drowning. An assured feast for the storks. The little harvest mice spend their last days at home in a wet nest that they themselves have gnawed holes in. Water seeps everywhere, even into the fur of the young mice that no longer have their mother to warm them up. Hypothermia is a looming threat. The rain stops just in time. The inhabitants of the meadow can once again see the sun. Wet and cold, the nest of the harvest mice has become far too small for its inhabitants. The small ones finally leave the home. Spared of drought-like conditions by the rain, the meadows of the high Vosges are dazzling with color. In the reeds, some mice are still active. This harvest mouse is looking for food. He could spend the night looking. The young mice are spending their first day out of the nest. They must now learn to recognize really tasty plants. The reed is not part of it. It is not that vegetation is lacking in the meadow, but it is necessary to expend energy to find them. The purple lythrum really pleases this little mouse. On the young willow next to the purple lythrum, she discovers something especially good: nuts. The harvest mice siblings seldom meet. As the days go by, they will venture further and further into the meadow. They will have to spend the winter with other harvest mice in nests sheltered from the frost so that they can feed themselves enough to keep their energy up. Those who survive will then find a partner in the spring and thus ensure the survival of their species in Alsace. For the two young storks still perched on their dead poplar, it's high time to learn how to fly. All the other storks have already gathered in the meadow below. The two young ones must not miss the big flight down south. Now, only the young female is missing. The long journey to Africa begins with a leap into the abyss. Now all is well. Next spring, the young stork will return to the Illwald Nature Reserve in the Selestat Ried area, in the heart of the Alsatian wilderness. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and if you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe.